etc. as listed on the order paper. Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the Draft Conduct of Employment Agencies and Employment Businesses Amendment Regulations 2022 and the liability of trade unions in proceedings in tort, increase of limits on damages, Order 2022. The purpose of the first instrument is to lift the current ban on employers, bringing in agency staff to help them cope with industrial action. The second instrument makes a long overdue change to the maximum levels of damages the courts can award against trade unions that take unlawful industrial action. I'd like to start by examining why the government is making these changes. Our trade union laws are designed to support an effective and collaborative approach to resolving industrial disputes. They rightly seek to balance the interests of trade unions and their members with the interests of employers and the wider public. While the government continues to support the right to strike, this should always be the last resort. The rights of some workers to strike must also be balanced against the rights of the wider public to get on with their daily lives. Strikes can and do cause significant disruption. This is particularly the case when they take place in important public services such as transport or education. It cannot be right that trade unions can, as we saw in the case of the recent rail strikes, seek to hold the country to ransom if their demands are not met. Some trade unions...
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Could she tell the House what assessment she's made of the availability of spare teachers, spare nurses, spare train drivers to actually fill in the gaps during the strike?
I thank my honourable friend for the question. I take that up a little bit later on in my speech. Yes, I'll give way.
Very grateful to the Minister for giving way so early on. How does she justify overturning the Trades Union Wales Act, which bans the use of agency workers in devolved services, and intending, therefore, to overturn the consequences of Welsh democracy?
Thank you very much indeed for the question. I thank the honourable member for the question. I do talk about that a little bit later on, and it's a reserved right. It cannot be right, though. So some trade unions appear to us to be looking to create maximum disruption in a bid to stay relevant rather than constructively seeking agreement with employers and avoid conflict. In light of this, the government has reviewed the current industrial relations framework and have come to the conclusion that change is needed. The first change we are making is to remove the outdated blanket ban on employment businesses supplying agency workers to clients, where they would be used to cover official industrial action. Employers can, of course, already hire short-term staff directly to cover industrial action, but this change will give them the ability to work with specialist employment businesses to identify and bring in staff. This change does not in any way restrict the ability of workers to go on strike. It will, however, give employers another tool they can use when trying to maintain the level of service they offer to the public. This is a... Yes, of course.
I'm grateful to the Minister giving way. Has she considered the 100,000 vacancies we currently have in the NHS because we cannot fill those vacancies? And the staff that are working for agencies are also unionised and will not cross a picket line. So how will she fulfil this legislation?
Thank you very much indeed I thank the honourable lady for the question. It is, of course, their choice, and it is also their choice to take up the agency position. Yes, of course.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. In helping the honourable lady opposite with her intervention, as a former teacher, as a former trade union representative, I'm more than happy to go back in any classroom to help out when you have the disastrous Not Education Union threatening to bring down schools in this country.
I thank my honourable friend for the question and his expertise and knowledge he has in the field. This is a permissive change that won't force employment businesses to supply agency staff to employers to cover strikes, and agency workers will still be able to decline any assignments that they are offered, and the right to strike is unaffected. This change is simply about giving both employers and employees more freedom and flexibility to decide what works best for them. If you don't mind, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to make some progress now, please. A freedom that the current outdated regulations deny them. I have also seen some reports that this will somehow put workers or the wider public at risk. This is not the case. Employers, I will make some progress, please. Employers will still have to comply with broader health and safety.
He's speaking later.
I understand you're speaking later. Employment businesses will still need to be satisfied that the workers they supply are suitably qualified and trained. Alongside this change, we are also to increase the levels of damages a court can award in the case of unlawful strike action. It has long been the case that employers can bring a claim for damages against a trade union that has organised unlawful strike action. The upper limits to the damages that can be awarded are set out in the Trade Union and Labour Relations Consolidation Act 1992 and are based on the size of the union that organised the unlawful strike action. But this damages regime has not been reviewed since 1982, and so these limits are significantly out of date. As a result, the deterrent effect that Parliament intended has been significantly reduced. The Secretary of State is using powers granted to him in Section 22 of the Trade Union and Labour Relations Consolidation Act 1992 to increase the existing caps in line with inflation. In practical terms, this means that the maximum award of damages which could be made against the smallest unions will increase from £10,000 to £40,000, and for the largest unions will increase from £250,000 to £1 million. This is a proportion. Yes, of course, absolutely.
Does she think it's right that the Electoral Commission has a lower cap to fine fraud if it was found in the Conservative Party than she is proposing to trade unions? Does she think it's right that fines are higher for trade unions than preserving the democratic function of our country?
I thank the honourable member for his question. I will, in fact, move on. This is a proportionate change because we're simply increasing these amounts to the level they would have been had they been regularly updated since 1982. We are increasing the limits in line with the Retail Price Index, which is a well-understood measure of inflation and is the same measure for other employment legislation. By increasing the limits on damages in line with inflation, we are sending a clear message to trade unions that they must comply with the law when taking industrial action. Strikes should only be as a last resort and should only ever be called as the result of a clear, positive and democratic decision of union members. The key point is that unions that continue to comply with our trade union law will be completely unaffected by this change. The changes we are making will ensure that our trade union and agency laws remain fit for purpose. We are giving businesses the freedom to manage their workforce and empowering workers by giving them more choices about the kind of assignments they can accept. We will continue to protect an individual's right to strike where proper procedures are followed, while ensuring that trade unions are deterred from taking unlawful industrial action. I beg to move that both instruments are considered by this House.
The question is the motion relating to employment agencies, etc., as on the order paper. Just to give prior notice that there are many more speakers than